save our country is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other.
Hi, I'm Tony Lyons, president of MAHA Action, and welcome to the MAHA Revolution. So we have a great lineup of people today, and I'm just going to go through them quickly. We have Dr. Oz, then we're going to have Calley Means, Kelly Ryerson, Sayer G, Dr. Eric Berg, Danielle Gansky, Dr. Robert Malone, and finally Russell Brand and Michael Kane. So I just wanted to say a few things before we get started. And that is that for the first time since its inception, ACIP is fulfilling its mandate to serve as a truly independent body advising the CDC. So these are, part of a whole host of, more than 100 changes that have been taking place at HHS, and just really cleaning up all the corruption at the government agencies. Some of the other things are that some of the country's largest food producers have been making a lot of changes, and we've talked about them in the past, but most recently, Tyson Foods is going to remove high fructose corn syrup from its products. McDonald's is going to invest $200 million in regenerative agriculture. And we're talking to Chick-fil-A, and I'm sure the government will be talking to them too. So there's lots of really great stuff happening. And then, President Trump, in his announcement this week, was really just incredibly strong and came out so forcefully to defend the MAHA movement, to explain possible sources of autism, to talk about Tylenol, to talk about the MMR, spacing out vaccines, taking the Hep B at 12 years old. So he was just so strong, so far out front. And it was just great to see him do that. And we should really be all thankful and grateful to President Trump for his bravery there and for really taking such a strong stand. So there are a lot of other great things going on, but I want to move just quickly into our great lineup. So we're going to start out with the head of CMS, Dr. Oz. Great to have you back.
Thanks, Tony. I appreciate your kind words. So let me give you a little bit of background to what happened on Monday, which I think many will believe is a historic day, because we finally just went out and started talking about some of the earlier findings and research that started in the spring. And just to put this all in context, there's been a strong desire for data to drive a lot of the decisions, to be very transparent, radically transparent, painfully transparent at times, just to tell you what we're finding. And historically, what would happen is government might notice something, but they're not 100% sure. They're like 95% sure. And so they'll hold on to it because there's a lot of criticism that happens if you're not 100% sure. And when that happens, then everyone starts to get distracted and panicked about it. And so government generally tries not to do too much to ruffle the feathers of the constituents. This administration, I think, has been different demonstrably. And the president sets the tone for that. As Secretary Kennedy, likewise, is not willing to compromise on any of the really important things that he feels need to be communicated to the American people. In fact, he often says that folks with chronic illnesses have often been gaslit. Take autism as an example. If you think autism is primarily a genetic issue, then you can sort of discount all the other accusations about environmental changes and attribute the five-fold increase in the incidence of diagnosed autism over the last quarter century to measurement issues or other interesting observations, but they're really not addressable. And so the autism problem is really yours and your family's to manage. And as we started digging into this, and again, the president and the secretary said we're going to put $50 billion into $50 million in NIH grants in order to figure out where the opportunities are to research these problems. And they got 200 applications for that money, and they gave out 13 awards. And those awards are designed to be able to really dive into some of these areas that historically have been ignored by the medical community. And one of the things the NIH is charged with doing is investing resources where there's not a good commercial reason to do it right now. And that's how you find earth-shattering insights. Then after a while, everyone else starts to get behind. During this process of awarding these grants, but also getting smart about autism and understanding what the practices are around the country, some signals signals began to arise. And these signals are ones that you want to react to. Now, again, there's two approaches. Notice that there's a topic that, for example, the medical community that's in that space is beginning to adopt as a practice, and then have them watch it. And over the next 5 years, you'll start to develop some more concrete ideas about what's going on. And those ideas then can at some point be communicated to the American public. And that's how historically government and science have interacted to make sure we don't make too many mistakes, but get the word out. 5 years is a long time. And when you've got a 3-year-old at home who's showing signs of being on the autism spectrum, that's too long. And so we decided that we would elevate these. And the secretary had been following this, obviously, because his life has been dedicated to the space, in particular in autism. We elevated it to the president, and he did not want to wait even a day. It just didn't organize ourselves to be able to present this in a fashion seemed painstaking. But you could tell from the passion that the president had on Monday, this has been something that's been on his chest for a long time. And he said that for decades, he's been thinking about it, didn't understand why there wasn't more serious advice being given. And he decided to get out and start talking about these issues in a press conference held at the White House. And as you heard, he covered two major themes. The first was acetaminophen, and recounted some of the data that had caught his attention, believes that it's used more commonly than it probably should be. Caution women that if they have high fevers or serious problems, they ought to call a doctor and get the advice before taking acetaminophen. That's what the data seems to suggest from enough studies that we think it's worth sharing with the American people. There was a big review in an article the last week of August from the Harvard School of Public Health, a review of over 40 studies, most of which raised concerns. Now, again, this is not causation. I'm going to be, got to be really straight on this. We don't know that Tylenol or acetaminophen, the ingredient in it, is causing autism. What we do know is it seems like that there's folks who take out a fair amount of acetaminophen seem to have a higher risk of having children with autism. There are studies that go against that. Those are addressed in that Harvard review. But when you have a study of that magnitude and you have looked at all those specific papers, and Jay Bhattacharya, who runs the NIH, have, the preponderance of concerns start to nudge you a little bit towards cautioning folks. And when asked specifically, some of the researchers in this area, and we did this, would you caution a pregnant spouse or relative? They said yes. Again, you're not saying don't take it. You're just saying, don't be willy-nilly in taking it. Try to take it when it's really necessary. A low-grade temperature, a stub toe may not be a good enough reason to take some of these medications. And most medications during pregnancy should raise concerns. The main ones that would typically be used generally are not recommended. So we understand Tylenol and acetaminophen is the main recommended medication in that setting, which is why this is an important observation. But there are connecting bits of data here. A child's liver is young, when they're young, is immature. A child in utero, likewise, immature. Animal studies do suggest prenatal could be concerning. But because it's the only really approved medication, we don't have a lot of other options. So use the lowest dose for the shortest amount of time for the high fever or pain or the significant pain that you're experiencing. And hopefully we can reduce in aggregate the amount of this medication being used, in part because in many instances, you could probably get through the whatever your challenge is without having to use the medication. That's sort of the first one. The second one is Leucovorin. And Leucovorin is a prescription medication. Be very clear about this. It's a doctor-prescribed medication. The central theory, as you all probably been reading, is that some children have a central folate deficiency in their brain. There's two main causes that we know about. There may be others, but one is a genetic defect where they don't have a receptor to absorb naturally methylated folate in their body. And the other is they have antibodies blocking that receptor. So you bypass that receptor by using a prescription medication. There have been 15 studies or so, a couple hundred patients involved. The doctors involved in those studies believe about half of the patients are benefiting. It's not clear how much of a benefit, but there are definitely some kids where there's a really significant benefit. The side effect profile is pretty safe with this prescription Leucovorin. It's been around for a long time. It's used in chemotherapy when people are given drugs like methotrexate to block folate from getting into cancer cells, which would kill them. And so you can rescue people with the medication. I think in aggregate, if you look at those two examples of early signals, this is what we want to do. Come to you with breaking news when we find it. Again, you'll be in the know. You can decide. I'm not telling you to do any of these things. In the case of Leucovorin, to make it easy enough to use, we pushed hard, and Marty's going to change the label of the medication. It will allow state Medicaid programs to actually pay for it. So when doctors and a patient decide it's worth taking, prescriptions written, they get paid for. Medicaid and CHIP they cover more than half the kids in the country, which is a separate statement that there's that much poverty in America, but more than half the kids are covered through Medicaid and CHIP, and we believe private insurers will follow soon after. So we have a good news story that we might have an option to offer to folks, especially moms who are struggling with their kids, that enough of a time is effective that it's worth discussing with your doc. Again, I personally called a lot of the doctors involved in these trials, and the majority said that they would consider it for a child of theirs or relative based on the data they have. It's going to take years more to know for sure. In the meantime, now you're armed with the data that we have. The president, today I was with him, and he is passionate, again, about these issues. He wanted to make sure everyone realized that he feels strongly that telling you is the right thing to do, no matter what's said in the media. He will want to be transparent on these topics. At least you'll know, as we know, what's happening, which makes him feel better, because now the ball is in your court. You control your destiny, and that empowers you to become the world expert in your body. And that is ultimately what was the goal of Monday's press conference. All right.
Thanks so much, Dr. Oz. Yeah, that was great. I mean, there are lots of mainstream media people on this call. And, I've been watching them closely, and many of us have. And we've seen all of the attacks that they've made, that all of you on this call have made against the MAHA movement, saying that Bobby Kennedy or President Trump are somehow anti-science. And, we would really hope that you could engage in dialogue. So what Dr. Oz was saying is that, they're trying to give you the latest state of gold standard science, where we are now, what the latest studies show. Doesn't mean that it's absolute fact. It's not like Dr. Fauci saying, I am science, science stops with me. This is a process, and we, put out the best science we can find. And that's what everybody ought to want. And that's what all of you reporters ought to report, that, if you disagree and if you have other science, present that science. But, don't make these, general broad statements demeaning people who are really trying hard, who are fighting with only one cause, not to make more money, not to have more power, nothing other than to make Americans more healthy. So I just want to make that clear and keep coming back to that's what this is about. It's about making Americans healthy. So anyway, Calley Means is going to update us on what's going on with MAHA in the government.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to what you and Dr. Oz were saying, Tony. To our friends in the media and to advocates on this call, I think there's just a more interesting story that's being lost with this autism announcement, which is that there's a real culture shift happening in medicine right now. I think you had an interesting comment from Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who's a former FDA commissioner, and he said, yeah, he actually agrees that there's a potential link with autism and Tylenol, but he didn't say anything because he doesn't want to confuse patients. I think there's this infantilization of the American patient that's been ingrained into our healthcare system, where you have a situation where Tylenol, the company itself said for pregnant women not to take this drug. As Dr. Oz said, there's actually an overwhelming meta-analysis from Harvard that shows the majority of studies show a risk. There's a ton of concern. There's a ton of concern in other countries. And why not give that information to the American people? And it's been attacked. This has been attacked by the media as old news, that this information, it was out there. But President Trump, Secretary Kennedy, Dr. Oz, Marty Makary, Jay Bhattacharya, I think you saw this in the press conference. They want to treat American patients like adults and release information as they get it, and trust Americans to handle that complex information and make a decision for their families. And you have this, I think, breathtaking lack of humility from the medical system, a medical system that is overseeing the highest rates of pediatric cancer, pediatric prediabetes, pediatric autism, pediatric autoimmune conditions, pediatric cardiology issues, the highest rates of all these conditions of any society in the history of human civilization, while we spend 3 times more per capita than any society in human civilization on healthcare, and live 5, 6, 7 years less than most other developed countries. This medical system, after a real failure on many fronts, we can all agree on, even people in the media during COVID, there's just no humility. And to me, there are some very important announcements. The Leucovorin and the Tylenol warning are very important. But I think what the media is missing, and to me, it really does tie to what happened on Sunday with Charlie Kirk's memorial. I think there's really something happening in this administration in this time right now where we're widening the aperture of really culturally what we can discuss. Really actually inviting, this administration is inviting a complex conversation among the American people. These are not black and white issues. But there's a real actual trust in the American people to handle complex information and make decisions. And I think there's a belief that given the lack of trust in the medical system, which is not Secretary Kennedy's fault, it's the fault of the medical system itself. But the only way to improve the situation is to release information and actually encourage a messy conversation by putting information out there as we get it. The most important headline from the autism event is why the heck isn't there as much passion in the medical industry to ask these complex questions as there is to defend Tylenol? There's been an absolute circling of the wagon from the media and every elite medical institution in the country to defend Tylenol when the company itself said it's not appropriate for pregnant women to take. Where is that passion for childhood nutrition? Where's that passion for asking root cause questions of why we're so sick? Of telling kids not to eat ultra-processed food, of asking questions about our over-medicalization crisis, of asking questions about our vaccine schedule. As President Trump said, there's questions we can ask. There's absolutely questions we can ask. There's radically different protocols between different countries. These are appropriate, mature areas of debate. So I think that's a story that's being missed. Just that this administration is actually practicing science, which is messy, which is asking taboo questions, which is really turning over every stone. They're treating Americans like adults from public health authorities for the first time to be able to handle complex information. And I think the media and consensus narrative among the medical system, which is that this news is confusing patients, this news is scaring moms. I don't think they're talking to moms. Moms are scared about the skyrocketing rates of chronic disease. Moms are scared about why autism rates are going up so high. What's going to solve this, what's going to make moms feel better, and I've got a 1-week-old in the other room, and speaking from personal experience, I think I speak for a lot of parents. What's going to make them feel better is that we start grappling with these issues. That is the importance, and I think historic importance of this autism event. And again, I think tying to the Charlie Kirk issue, I think we're not dealing with just finite policy issues right now. This administration, warriors like Dr. Oz, Secretary Kennedy, Marty McCary, Jay Bhattacharya are trying to widen the Overton window and invite a complex conversation among Americans. So I think it's regrettably partisan and regrettably messy. I mean, I think at its core, and we all know this from Secretary Kennedy, this is a unifying message that, we're trying to communicate with MAHA. It's a message of love. It's a message of compassion. And it is regrettable that everything becomes partisan. I mean, it is factually true that if President Trump cures cancer in the next 4 years, Democrats will find some way to be pro-cancer. That is an unfortunate and regrettable reality we are in. But we need to lean into this nonetheless, and with love, as Secretary Kennedy's trying to do, with the unifying energy. But we have an opportunity to lean into this invitation from President Trump at that event to go bold in looking for solutions. I think politically, we're going to redefine politics with Secretary Kennedy leading a charge, really a charge for children, and a charge for fearless scientific inquiry. I think if we can keep winning, that's going to infect the entire political system, and it's going to be the consensus sooner than we think. But we need to take this opening that President Trump invited us and invited the country to take, and just lean in with good energy to fearless inquiry and discussion about why our kids are so sick. I think that's the big historic message from this. And I know everyone in the administration is very fired up to continue fighting for kids.
Thanks so much, Calley. I think that your point is a great one, that, that this is about rebuilding, restoring trust in our public health agencies. That if you read the newspapers, you would think that public health, that children have been doing so well over the last 20 years. But the facts are, you can look at the numbers. The facts are that we have the sickest children in the world, even though we're spending 3 times the money that any other of the 30 industrialized companies spend. So these experts, these people who are being propped up by the media, they've really failed the American public. They have been a disaster. And what we have the opportunity to do now is to be part of a movement to not only rebuild trust, but to rebuild public health and to really fight for our children. And it's not about vaccines or drugs or food. It's about all of these things becoming delivery mechanisms for toxins. And we have to stop that. And what Kelly Ryerson can tell us about is the effort of, pesticide companies to increase their delivery of toxins to people, and Kelly's work to make that stop and to prevent them from getting a liability shield, and the help that all of us ought to give her and to that whole battle so that our children don't suffer more. So thanks so much for coming on, Kelly.
Thank you so much. And thank you too. It was such a week, as we all know, and I just felt so proud and pleased to be part of this movement when I saw that HHS team standing up there, and just know how smart and deliberate and brilliant they are in thinking about our best interests. And also thank you to Calley for always placing things in a framework that I think is really understandable. So now on to my favorite subjects of agriculture and pesticides. I have some updates on the chemical manufacturer immunity shield. So for a brief background, really brief because I've talked about it before, the Bayer stock price is down 72.2% since they acquired the chemical company Monsanto in 2018. So they are in deep financial trouble due to the glyphosate cancer litigation. So rather than putting a label on the bottle, which is what they could do to make the litigation all go away, to have a label that says some studies show that glyphosate might cause cancer, they're instead trying to take away our ability to sue when we get sick from chemical exposure. Now, this isn't just Bayer. This is all chemical manufacturers. This extends to 57,000 different formulations of chemicals that we would have our rights stripped if this legislation passes. So this famous section 453 that's in the Interior Spending Bill effectively provides that legal immunity to chemical manufacturers. Thousands of you have been calling in to Congress and expressing that you do not want this. I think it's really made a lot of a difference in their listening. Fortunately, I don't think that this is going to go to a vote because of just generally not agreeing on an interior spending bill at this time, because the Democrats and Republicans can't determine where spending should go or agree upon it. So if one of two things is going to happen next week, either the government shuts down or there will be a continuing resolution. That would mean that this spending bill goes out into November, and most likely we would be back in the same place where liability shield wording would be in it, and we'll have to do the fight, continue the fight up. So we'll keep our eye on that. Next slide. Another area that we're really working on is this new farm bill is supposed to come out in mid-October. There's rumor that it might be out for markup October 16th. Unfortunately, the chair of the House Ag Committee, G.T. Thompson, has already announced that he plans on putting this manufacturer liability shield into the new farm bill, just like it was in the last version of the farm bill. It's super disappointing. We thought that we had more pressure going, clearly not, because that's his intention. So we'll be fighting on that in mid-October. The state level immunity shields are returning. These are the shields like the ones that passed in Georgia and in North Dakota last year, or last session actually. So in those two states, you can no longer sue if you get sick from chemical exposure. You can't sue because that's been stripped. They are going to go back into Oklahoma, North Carolina, Missouri, Tennessee, likely Iowa, and some other states as well. So we'll be having state level efforts there. The Supreme Court, we're awaiting what the White House's decision is on whether or not they are going to recommend that the Supreme Court take up a case that effectively is arguing whether or not the EPA should have the ultimate say on whether a chemical is bad or good or harmful or not. We hope that the Supreme Court doesn't even take this case on at all. And so hopefully that will be the case. On the Hill, I've heard that Bayer and CropLife and other industry groups are going hog wild. They're meeting regularly, constantly, trying to tell Congress that this is not a liability shield at all that they're trying to push, and it's just trying to simplify labeling matters. That is not actually what's happening. And a new twist is that they're sending in mom and pop landscaping companies to go and make their arguments that it's just so confusing having different labels in different places. So, you know, on behalf of the small businesses, let's make sure this liability shield goes into place. So that's a new tactic. You know, and I was so, as I say, I was so thrilled with what was happening. I really would love to see the day when Trump comes out and he says the same thing about pesticides that he said regarding autism, because our children are being inundated with chemicals on the parks and playgrounds and food. And these synthetic pesticides just need to be eliminated in those places to start. The MAHA report, though, I have to say, a lot of media did reach out to me to ask my comments on the MAHA report because it felt that it was very weak on pesticides in comparison to what the first report was. And I have to say, I'm echoing what Calley was saying, because we have still a document that is talking about investing money into research in the microbiome, into infertility, and the accumulation of different pesticides. That is revolutionary, that there's a government document that's even talking about studying these things, because it has been avoided at all costs, because pesticides are one of those key components that are in there. So I found that MAHA strategy report to be a great first step. I'm excited to see what the research is that's behind it. And finally, a line that's in there that's controversial is the EPA requesting money to prove to everyone and do a PR campaign that we should really trust what their research is. And to me, you know, I know historically that we should have no trust in it. It's all industry based. There's been all kinds of corruption that I've documented in my work for the last decade. So I look forward to seeing whether or not the EPA is willing to rise up to that gold standard research that they definitely are committing to at HHS. And particularly as we look to the re-registration of glyphosate and atrazine next year, because there's a lot of data there that shows that we should definitely take some cautious approach to all that. So those are my updates. And once again, if you are interested in signing up to help with the liability shield, please go to stoppoison.org and I will send you all the updates you could need in terms of who to call and how you can help, because that's literally the only way I think we're going to be overcoming this. So thank you, Tony, for giving me the time to share that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kelly, for all the incredible work that you're doing. Really grateful. So, you know, Secretary Kennedy and President Trump are just making such incredible progress. And I just want to keep coming back to that what's really clear is that they're working for us rather than this sort of cesspool of corruption that has run these big organizations, the CDC, the FDA, all of them. And, you know, that's being turned around now. And it's just incredible that that's happening. And, you know, some of the time it doesn't happen as quickly as we would all want, but this is, you know, 7 or 8 months, and there's been just so much progress, so much forward motion. So, you know, one of the people who's been really great about putting that into context, somebody who's one of the toughest, you know, most steadfast MAHA warriors out there. He's a member of the Disinformation Dozen, which is just an incredible badge of honor. You know, sits on that list with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and many other fighters. And that person is Sayer G. So thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks so much, Tony. Thanks, Kelly, too. What a great update. Wow, what a week. So I was in DC last week because just a few days before Senator Cassidy begun a hearing with the Help Committee to essentially try to trap you know, our secretary in a narrative around him irresponsibly, dangerously firing, you know, Susan Moneres. Essentially what happened was the media was starting to create this black media tidal wave. And it actually started to culminate with Bernie Sanders' op-ed in The Guardian on the 12th, which was just 5 days before the hearing. And essentially, it was using, really a UK-based media outlet in order to basically, try to oust Bobby. And this was, echoed throughout the media, hundreds of articles saying he's dangerous. Actually, The Nation had a title that he's a psycho, American psycho. And the Black propaganda that we've experienced, it's been so nauseating because, last year, CCDH, right, who came up with the Disinfo Dozen, now honorific slur, they leaked a memo as well, which basically said they were going to put a black ops out on at then presidential candidate Bobby, and so what we're seeing is the deploying of influence operations that have foreign roots within our own political system, with senators literally using those foreign platforms to suggest that a democratically elected cabinet member should be ousted. So what I saw in the day leading up to that hearing, where of course Bobby was not invited to give testimony, so complete setup, was a huge outpouring of grassroots support. We saw the night before the hearing, 80,000 emails were sent by advocates within 4 hours because of this network that is 100% grassroots. There's no lobbying money being put into this. This is we the people. This is the MAHA moms and dads, standing up, basically wrenching from the grip of, really paid and bought, officials, the freedom that we all hold dear. And so essentially what I witnessed is kind of a miracle, but a confirmation of why we are in this incredible timeline, why we can celebrate what happened just 2 days ago with Trump coming out and going far beyond what we expected. So many people thought the discussion would focus on Tylenol being sort of like this, just distraction, whereas it was a very nuanced discussion. And thankfully, we finally got to hear the truth broadcasted by our own president about the known causes of autism, which do include vaccines. So this was an incredible win. I was just shocked actually by how successful it was. So essentially what happened after the hearing was Cassidy, within 24 hours, was really forced by the public response to then offer our secretary an ability to testify. But by then, the movement had already taken such leaps and bounds that no one wanted to get trapped in that. And that's actually further testimony for how incredible this movement is and how powerful and really mainstream it is at this point. That we have this popular momentum. I mean, I had 4 or 5 major outlets try to contact me to get some type of comment about our movement, because I think the mainstream media is now realizing they're losing their model of monetization. Their readers no longer really care what they have to say, and a lot of the propaganda is behind a paywall. And then of course we're pulling out the corrupt pharmaceutical advertising model for them. So they're really destabilized, actually, and you're seeing that in the projections and the extreme hyperbolic shadow projection when it comes to this advocacy. But I think we're at that critical turning point now, and I'm seeing how even for the mainstream media, existentially, they realize that they're going to have to get with the program. That this is not a new movement. The Tylenol topic is a great example. Since 2008, we've been indexing research on the adverse effects of Tylenol. And William Parker, PhD, who's largely responsible for putting together a lot of the research that I think actually ended up informing some of the decision-making here as far as warning the public. I mean, he came to our site, Green Med Info, back in 2000 and I think it was 18, because he couldn't get published anywhere else. No one would take seriously the research that clearly showed that this is a red flag. And now it's becoming, a national and international conversation, because essentially people have woken up. You can't have informed medical choice if you deprive people of the information that shares whether there's a risk or not, right? And that's a profound violation. So people have had enough of this safe and effective mantra. We want the research. We want to be able to make informed choices with our healthcare practitioners as partners in that process. And that can include a chiropractor, can include a homeopath. It doesn't have to be AMA certified, pediatrician. So I'm super excited by what I'm witnessing. I think that we are finally at the point where this movement, if you will, is truly being recognized by the powers that be as a mainstream movement, that this is truly a nonpartisan movement, and it's for every single parent, every person who believes that they have a right to choose what happens to their body. And also, the last thing I'll end on here is I got to experience Marjorie Taylor Greene's hearing on her Clear Skies Act, right? The geoengineering bill that she's introducing. I got to speak with her, and I went to her office, spoke with her legislative director, and they're so excited about what MAHA has done, which is, 30 plus states have introduced bills, all saying, listen, enough's enough. Stop poisoning our air, our water, our soil, our food. This is a massive, incredible opportunity. And it was Secretary Kennedy in April that actually said he will get behind, as HHS Secretary, he will get behind this. And this is something that every MAHA should support. So it's incredible. Like who doesn't care about the quality of their air and their water and their soil and their food? It's not just this dialectic around vaccines. I think this is going to take not only the United States by storm, but the world by storm. And I'm just so proud of this movement. I can tell you the grassroots support for it has never been stronger. And I really want to thank Tony, you for, just being such a powerful anchor for this movement and helping us reach the next level, because we're just starting. I think that it's going to be 10 times more powerful in just a few months based on what I'm seeing. So amazing week.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, is that President Trump said that this is just the first of many new pieces of information that he's going to put out, and that, there are going to be dozens of them. And, we really have it. I'm going to keep on saying it. We really have a government now that's dedicated to real science, to gold standard science, to radical transparency. And you're seeing it in action, and you're seeing the media, once again, many of those people are on this call, really not covering that. And I would hope that those of you who are on the call will start to cover that, and will look at the actual things that are being put out, comment on them, and don't make general kind of anti-science statements that are really just not helpful. So the next person we have on is Dr. Eric Berg. He's been just an incredibly bold thought leader, health researcher, and just a great friend of the MAHA movement and public health in general. So thanks so much. Great to have you here.
Hey, thanks, Tony. Thanks for your leadership, because you're really leading this massive new movement. And I think, if we take a look at the big thing that's shifting, which is going to be going on for quite some time, is we're going from this viewpoint of you can't look at certain things, to, RFK talking about, we need to study everything. We need to look at everything. We need to hide nothing. So I know if someone tells me not to look, I'm going to look. And especially when you get into the area of vaccines. So I wanted to touch just on the Leucovorin, that medication that was discussed a couple of days ago in the news with the conference, because there's been some questioning why of like this drug, right? And they're looking at it like a drug. And yes, it is classified as a drug. It's an old drug, but if you look at it, it's a vitamin. It's a synthetic vitamin, but it's still a vitamin. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because in the media, you hear some people say, why can't we just take a natural vitamin? Well, if you take a look at why they're even recommending it, I want to talk a little bit about that. They're recommending it because of a really important problem they're trying to solve in relationship to autism. And I want to give you this data relating to that. 58 to 60% of children with autism test positive for this autoimmune problem to the receptor for folate. I mean, that's crazy. 76% of them have an autoimmune problem with the receptor. I mean, this is like so significant. And if you take regular folate, like methylfolate, you're not going to get the penetration into that receptor like you would with this synthetic version, which is a drug, Leucovorin. So Leucovorin actually goes through several additional pathways that penetrate into the brain to give your brain this folate that it needs. So we have this super high ratio of autistic children that have this problem. And then also you have, kids with autism are 19 times more likely to have this autoimmune problem. And this goes beyond just, all the other things that are involved. So, and if you take a look at why folate is so important, it's because folate is used in the brain to fuel myelin, help with DNA. The synapses helps give energy to the neurons, helps build neurotransmitters, helps to replenish glutathione. So it's a super, super important vitamin. And there's certain, I'm all for natural vitamins, but there's a couple of synthetic ones that I do recommend, like benfotiamine, that's B1 for peripheral neuropathy, and then also a synthetic bile salt called TUDCA, which is highly researched. But folate, a synthetic version of folate, apparently has some significant improvements in improving speech, decreasing irritability, emotional stability, because it bypasses the bottleneck from that antibody. So I did a deep dive into this, and I wanted to know why are we even creating this? Why was this autoimmune disease even created? So I started looking at different aspects of why that could be, and I've done a huge deep dive into just autoimmune in general. And there's usually always a severe vitamin D deficiency. Now, I'm sure they're going to be testing it, but vitamin D controls the regulation of the tolerance for antibodies. So if you don't have enough vitamin D, your ability to keep the autoimmune disease suppressed kind of goes away. So I'm sure they're going to find this. And these are all just ideas and theories, but if a child has a combination of several things, let's say, for example, that they get too many vaccines with aluminum or mercury, whatever, on top of this autoimmune issue, on top of a vitamin D deficiency, they might be a lot more likely to develop autism. So these things are all going to be looked at. There's also, mainstream media kind of packages autism, and either it's already been around forever, we're just finally diagnosing it, or they'll say it's just genetic, as if we can't do anything about it. Like it's all genetic, which then it just stops right there. But there is a couple genetic pieces to this. There's a genetic problem with the absorbing of folate, number one. There's also a lot of genetic problems absorbing vitamin D. And there's also even in autoimmune diseases, there's a lot of underlying genetic issues in the research on the connection between adjuvants, which are added things to vaccines, and also the development of autoimmune. So, I think this whole thing is going to roll out, and we're going to be able to really figure things out. There's even like some data on milk proteins, not casein, like having an allergy to milk protein or even lactose, but they found that the protein, the receptor for folate in cow's milk, is almost identical to the human receptor for folate. So maybe, and they'll find this out as we go, that could be another trigger for autism, because if you're going to go from breast milk to cow's milk that's homogenized, maybe that's the link. We'll figure this out. But the point is that when a young child consumes a lot of junk food, they're getting a lot of synthetic folic acid, which also builds up and creates a problem if they have a methylation problem. So there's a lot of interesting pieces of this puzzle. And at first I was a little bit against, this Leucovorin, but as I look at it, I'm like, wow, this is like a perfect solution to a huge problem that's super common in autism. So anyway, I just wanted to touch on that point. Back to you, Tony.
Eric, that was great. And, one of the things that you started off with was, this is the United States of America. We're allowed to ask questions. We should be turning over every stone. And that's what this administration is doing so well. Science never ends. we need more than ever out of the box thinking. We really need to end the problem that's happened, and that is that we are lagging behind the rest of the world, and we need scientific innovation. We need to really make progress so that people in this country don't go to Mexico or the Bahamas to get surgery, to get transfusions, to get stem cell therapy. They don't go to Germany to have knee surgery. People should be coming here. We should be the leader. We're spending so much money. We have so much power, so many resources. We should use those to help the American public and not have a government that just defends the interest of a handful of multi-billion-dollar companies. So, one of the people who really, Bobby Kennedy says pretty often that, that a sick person, somebody suffering from chronic disease, has one dream, and that's to get healthy. And that, to have real freedom, you have to have health. And to have a free mind, you have to have a healthy body. And so Danielle Gansky has really gone through a health journey and knows what it's like to suffer. And she's going to tell us her story, but she's not just talking for herself. She's talking for millions of Americans who are suffering.
Thanks so much for that introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Gansky. I was injured by psychiatric medications, prescriptions I never truly needed, and my life was forever changed by this. What happened to me wasn't an accident. The risks of antidepressants are deliberately hidden by pharmaceutical companies and the very institutions meant to protect us. At age 7 in the 2nd grade, I was put on my first psychiatric drug, Ritalin. A month later, I started on my second, Wellbutrin, which is an SNRI. From there, I was prescribed benzodiazepines, mood stabilizers, antipsychotics, and of course, SSRIs, all before my 10th birthday. I wasn't in crisis. I wasn't asking for help. I was merely fidgety and a shy little girl, and my parents were trusting the experts around them to ensure I had what I needed to be successful. Noticing that I was fidgety and restless, my teacher suggested to my parents that I might have a mental health issue and that they might want to take me to a psychiatrist. This was back in 2002, and since then, hundreds of thousands of teachers in schools all across America have been asked or even pressured to screen their students for mental health problems and refer them to clinicians, just like I was. Many of you may have heard these screenings are now mandatory in the state of Illinois. This is not just about getting kids the help they need. This is about enlisting schools and concerned parents into a pharmaceutical sales funnel that has led to 65 million Americans currently on a psychiatric drug. My completely normal childhood behavior was pathologized and used to justify a psychiatric diagnosis. Eager to make sure I had whatever I needed to be successful, my parents were not given all the information needed to make a truly informed choice on my behalf. And the consequences of that failure have been nothing short of a disaster. For me and for the millions of other young people who grew up under the influence of drugs that were never approved for long-term use. Throughout the years, whenever I told my doctor how awful I felt, what I now know were symptoms of drug harm, I was told it was my anxiety getting worse and that I really needed to raise the dose. Every adverse effect was blamed on me and my disorder or my broken brain. After college, I decided I need to find out who I was underneath these medications. Despite the fact that I had been on these drugs for my whole life, all while my brain was developing, I was tapered off over just a few weeks. For those who are unaware, despite the fact that 1 out of 5 Americans and 1 out of 3 teenagers is currently taking a psychiatric drug, there are 0 official guidelines for safe psychiatric drug tapering, meaning that all these people are being started on these drugs with no safe plan for how to stop. The consequence of this failure to understand and educate the medical professions on proper tapering protocols for me was a severe, life-altering, full-body neurological crisis, a profound brain injury that stole my life and has stolen the lives of so many others. The pain was unlike anything I've ever known. My entire nervous system was hijacked, a living nightmare of physical and psychological torment I could not escape. The pain and terror were nonstop. I was crawling out of my skin. It felt like a form of chemical torture. My vision became warped. Every sound, light, and movement felt amplified. painful and agitating. My body shook violently. I lost complete control. In the middle of withdrawal from antidepressants, terrified and desperate for help, I went to my doctor and told him I had done research and find out I was in withdrawal. But he dismissed me, told me that withdrawal is not possible, and what I was experiencing was just my anxiety getting worse. He even said that this was proof I needed to be on the medication. The very injury caused by the drug was used as justification to keep me on them. I felt so betrayed. His credentials automatically outweighed my lived experience. The worst part of this all was losing myself. I experienced profound cognitive impairment and memory loss, which erased who I was. My creativity, my intelligence, my ability to feel love or joy, everything that made me me was gone. At one point, I had to relearn basic functioning. At times, I could hardly speak. I was getting lost in my own house. My body shut down. I felt like I was dying, and sadly, people in this condition are driven to take their lives. I went from being a vibrant, joyful person who loved life to feeling chronically ill and disabled. No one imagines in their 20s that they'll have to grieve the loss of their own mind. I spent most of my 20s bedridden, grieving the life I used to have. I watched friends build careers, fall in love, while I felt trapped, a prisoner in my own body, like my life had been stolen from me far too soon. No one warned me this could happen. Not my doctors, not the labels, no one. I was completely blindsided, like many others. My story is just one window into a massive public health crisis. It's a complete scandal. But the one shining light in the darkness for me was a movement of former patients and descendant clinicians who have come together through trial and error, not only figured out for themselves what safe tapering looks like, but now in the UK have created a clinical manual outlining safe tapering guidelines, which have been adopted by practitioners within the NHS and elsewhere in the UK medical establishment. Here in the US, however, the mental health establishment has yet to even publicly acknowledge that withdrawal is different from relapse, let alone how severe and widespread it is. The result is that millions are harmed in silence by something that is completely preventable by the very institutions meant to protect us. Many have paid the price with their lives because when you are experiencing these horrific symptoms, but your doctor is telling you that the only way out is more drugs, you very reasonably can lose your will to live. And if you do end up taking your own life, they will say you lost your battle with mental health. Even though I'm still in the process of healing, the moment I regained even a little strength, I knew I had to turn my pain into purpose. This has become my life's mission to bring national recognition to this silent, hidden epidemic and push for reform so no one else has to endure the same harm or suffer in silence. I never set out to be an activist, but once I realized the scale of harm, I could not stay silent. Today, I'm part of a movement led by former and current patients, along with clinicians, researchers, practitioners of all kinds to help steer us out of this nightmare of over-medicalization of the normal human life and severe and totally preventable iatrogenic injury. So this crisis is part of the same entrenched system that poisons our food, our environment, and our health for profit. MAHA is proving that we don't have to accept that and that we can push back, expose the truth, and that truth will save lives. MAHA is such an important and powerful movement, and I'm so grateful to be part of it. And I want to give special thanks to Tony Lyons and Dr. Eric Berg because they're the reason I am here today. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Danielle. I mean, these companies have attacked our children. They've attacked all of us for a generation. And, you know, the general mainstream media protects these companies. The government has, in many cases, protected them from liability. So, you know, we're looking to come out and hold them accountable and get them to stop. So, you know, I'm so sorry, Danielle, that you suffered through all of this. And but I'm also so happy and proud to be, you know, joining you in this fight. And, you know, this is your fight. This is the fight that so many millions of young people are having to deal with. And we want to be part of that. We want to stand by you and hopefully really win and put this country in a position where children don't have to suffer the way you've suffered.
Thank you so much.
So next up, we have Dr. Robert Malone, who more than any other doctor that I can think of has always questioned the status quo. He stood up against incredible corruption, written groundbreaking books, and continues to fight for all of us in the ACIP. You know, we're told that all of these great people were fired from the ACIP, but the real fact is that, like so many other government bodies and groups, they've been just riddled with corruption, and that corruption has led to the kind of suffering that Danielle was subjected to. And so that really ends here, and it ends because of brave people like Dr. Robert Malone. Thanks so much for coming on.
Well, I'm a little taken aback by that introduction, Tony. Thank you very much. And struck by the parallels between Danielle's story and the story of so many mothers, parents, and children that have been vaccine damaged and gaslit, and their personal observations have been rejected by their physicians, by the medical industry, by corporate media. There's stark parallels, but I just felt the need to acknowledge that, coming off of listening to her incredible story, which parallels those of so many others that I've heard, and not the least of which is my wife's own family. Her older sister was diagnosed very early on as a paranoid schizophrenic, and has lived through exactly this kind of hell. But I want to turn to a more positive note, and I want to thank President Trump for the courage. I mean, the man, whatever you think, the man has got a certain amount of bravery. I can't tell you, I was harassed almost continuously up to this press conference by the likes of Politico reporters and others that were suggesting all kinds of narratives that they wanted me to somehow endorse, that the president was unlikely to say anything about vaccines, that the focus on Tylenol was just a way to distract from this other narrative, that the president would roll out this statement about Tylenol and then would turn away from the vaccine issues and move on to other things and considered this a done deal. My response was, well, that's interesting speculation. Let's see what actually happens. And the president exceeded all expectations, certainly my expectations. I want to thank the president, and of course, Secretary Kennedy has had our back, this little band of dissidents that has been speaking out aside the Overton window, as Calley correctly diagnosed, and saying that things aren't perfect here, that there are significant issues. There is suppression of information. There is a failure to acknowledge the damages that are being done. There is a failure to acknowledge the vaccine injured and the mothers that we see every time we have a rally. But Secretary Kennedy, I've known, has had our back. He's had our back for decades. He has been truly a warrior and a leader in trying to advance truth in the face of all of this suppression, harassment, gaslighting, and enforced narratives. And I knew from personal communication that President Trump also had our back, but I was totally unprepared for what took place in this press conference. I just want one particular quote from the president. "This will be as important as any single thing I've done." That is an amazing statement. The president is committed to making a major impact on chronic disease. The president is truly not only MAGA, he is 110% behind MAHA. And he is 110% behind reevaluating these very contentious issues that are at the core of what we're having to grapple with at the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. And I can't tell you how much, we're taking a fair amount of flack. Maybe that means we're over the target, but the president has got our back, and that is enormous. I've had the reason why I'm there is because I know that I have the support of the secretary, and I know that I'm working to advance the interests that the secretary wants to see in reformation, let's say, realignment, transformation of the culture of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. But I never expected this level of support from the president. And he went all in. He endorsed that the hepatitis B vaccine as a dose to be administered to children and newborns made no sense at all, which how many of us have been saying forever. Rand Paul has said repeatedly. And yet what we had at ACIP was, even within our own group, kind of a temporizing measure. Oh, let's just delay the first dose until month 1. But that, I think, is not sufficient, which is why I introduced the motion to table that. A lot of people don't understand what transpired there. But for me, I was faced with a decision of either voting to delay it for 1 month or voting against that motion and functionally endorsing administering hepatitis B vaccine at birth, continuing the standard. And instead, what I did was make a motion, and the committee, Vicki Pebsworth, immediately endorsed it. And then virtually all committee members, except for the chair, endorsed that, no, we're not ready to make that decision. We need to postpone that because we need to really have the data to address whether or not hepatitis B vaccine should be administered to children at all. We also moved forward on starting to break apart the MMRV logic. And there was just howls of indignation from the professional societies. We almost got it to the point, it was a tie vote broken by the chair, that we were going to have prescriptions for administering the COVID vaccines. We absolutely got through a motion that there has to be true informed consent, and that the CDC has to start providing comprehensive, true information in their vaccine information sheets, which many states use functionally for informed consent. We got through a vote saying that the VIS is not adequate, that they have to provide a much more comprehensive summary of what the adverse events are, not just of the COVID vaccines, but for all the vaccines, so that patients have true informed consent. And I can tell you where that's coming from for those that voted for that. And as I mentioned, it was a 50-50 split broken by the chair. But many of us are firmly behind the idea that this logic of public health and the state mandating medical procedures is not acceptable. That medical procedures and treatments need to be something that is discussed between a physician acting as a supporting consultant and a patient who is fully informed in deciding that that procedure, whether it's vaccination or acceptance of SSRIs or antipsychotics, is in their best interest. I feel strongly, and I think the president is with us on this, that we have to change the medical culture. Tony mentioned the arrogance, and I am 110 behind him. I find the arrogance of my peers in medical industry to be among their worst traits. the paternalism. It's got to stop. We need to start treating patients with respect. We need to recognize that they are independent individuals with minds that have the right to choose their own destiny. Whether they make the right decision or the wrong decision, they have the right to choose their own path forward in terms of medical procedures, treatments, vaccines, or anything else. I'm dug in on that, and I hope that you're with me on that. And I'm pretty sure the president is, and I am so grateful for that. So that's my core message here today is thank you, President Trump. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your willingness to step outside of politics and speak your mind and your own truth based on your own experience. And with that, I'll turn it back with gratitude.
Thanks so much, Robert. So the next speaker is somebody who's had his own health journey. He's had his own beautiful spiritual journey. He's lived through really dark times. He's fighting tough battles right now. But he's also got just incredible personal power, vision, inspiration, and just exudes a kind of a light, just a bright light. And so I'm so grateful to have him fighting alongside the MAHA movement. I look forward to all the epic things we can do together and you know, have been doing together, and just want to welcome Russell Brand.
Wow. Tony, your introductions have become so heartwarming and moving. A dose of myocarditis would be a relief to take the pressure off. I'm here with the hello officers, fantastic work officers. All right, sir, sorry to give you the wrong hand, sorry to give you the wrong hand. Just at an airport. I've really been well informed by this call. My wife, Laura, you were interested in what Dr. Berg was saying, Laura, because our son here had tetralogy when he was born, and
He has.
well, you know, he has that's a heart condition. And what were you saying? What was it about what Dr. Berg was saying that you're interested in, Laura?
I was interested in many, many elements of what Dr. Berg was saying, especially with the links to autism. Our son has DeGeorge syndrome and tetralogy of Fallot. And I found that actually up against a lot when you go into medical establishments and you have to answer questions about vaccinations. You can stand up to a lot of judgment as a mother. And I wonder how, if Dr. Berg actually, I had a question for him, which was to really ask how anyone, especially when, if there's already an immune deficiency syndrome present where you might be skeptical on certain vaccinations, I wonder how a mother and a father, but in my case, when I'm doing these appointments on my own and I'm coming up against the medical world, how a mother might handle questions that they're being asked when you have many questions. Well, I have personally many questions myself about things like the scheduled vaccinations and things like this. And so my personal question to Dr. Berg was, how should anyone, when they have doubts, take on medical questions when you're in an environment where you're already vulnerable because you have a child who is unwell or being cared for?
And I'd love to, find out what Dr. Berg thinks about that. And it's when, I said to my wife, look, I'm going to put you on this call, Laura. She said, don't you dare put me on this call. But once she started talking, actually quite difficult to get her to shut up, wasn't it? Isn't that often the way? We've made a lot of content this week about SSRIs and Secretary Kennedy's announcements. We've talked some about Trump's new explicitness about potential autism vaccine links, which many assume might mean that there is new research soon to be released that might undergird Trump's radical change of heart. While sometimes the world seems volatile and unbearable, I do believe that we're in a transformative moment spiritually. Your nation whose destiny appears to be to lead the world, it is changing so quickly. And whilst I'm sometimes scared about those changes, this week in particular, with the announcements around vaccines, we're doing a special bit of content actually next week with Gavin DeBecker, the writer of Forbidden Facts there from Tony's shelf, where we're talking more explicitly about the way that links between vaccines and autism are obfuscated. I was very interested by the personal account of Danny there on our call earlier, and her personal testimony about depression. And you're right, Tony. Like I suppose prior to the diagnosis of addiction, I took Ritalin. I took a number of those drugs that Danny was talking about, and I've had comparable experiences with a number of prescribed drugs. Now, like as a father, I just cannot trust Big Pharma with the health and lives of my beautiful daughters. They're not real babies, the baby she's carrying. In fact, no, they are real babies. Sorry. And beautiful son, and with Laura. I'm so grateful to be part of this music. Oh, I think Dr. Berg's going to come on and address my wife's questions just as we literally go through TSA. Laura, excuse me, sir, sorry about this. We're just on a MAHA call. You know, the MAHA movement supports Secretary Kennedy and his fight to ensure that big agriculture, big food and big pharma don't get to prescribe and define what the American public eat and do for their medical health. He wasn't really listening to that, but at least I got to do my elevator pitch. I'm going to give you back to Laura. Laura, Dr. Berg here.
Mommy, just
Hello.
why don't I just call you on your phone? I'll just call you on your phone.
That might be a good option, Dr. Berg. We are, Russell's handed me this as we're going through.
Dr. Berg has an answer. Dr. Berg has an answer.
He says he'll call you.
And this
If you'd
beautiful.
like to give an answer now, I think that's fine.
Your work, sir. Thank you for your work.
Yeah, it's perfect timing.
Dr. Berg, we better jump. We've got to put this machine. Oh, that's Dr. Berg.
Hello.
Oh, they're on a conference.
All right, let's see who we got.
Dr. Berg is going to give a little bit of an answer. I can feel it.
I'm going to mute the phone.
Yeah, I honestly, I think this is the problem that we're dealing with, is trying to have all the data to even have a conversation with your doctor. If you're at the mercy of not having all the facts and you're getting this one viewpoint. And this is one of the things, you have to find someone that really knows. And this is why we have a number of MAHA doctors coming up that you should tap into. But I think I don't want to take too much of Tony, your time, but why don't I'll call you and I'll give you some more specifics on your question. How about that? I don't want to hog Tony's time here.
Thank you, Doctor. Appreciate you addressing that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Russell, I hope you have a great trip. And
New York, actually. I'll come and find you. I'm in New York. I'm coming to New York.
definitely find me. I'm here. So here's the thing, the great thing about Russell that we can always count on is that he is in this movement day or night, at airports, beaches, mountaintops, anywhere that he is in the world. And we're very grateful for that. So next up, we have activist, street fighter, children's health defense advocate, Michael Kane.
Thanks so much, Tony. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Michael Kane. I'm the Director of Advocacy for Children's Health Defense. And last week, Tony, invited me onto this call graciously, where we talked about the Thank You RFK rallies that are happening across the nation this Saturday, September 27th, all at different times, almost a dozen states, over 24 cities. We have New York, California, Arizona, Florida, Nebraska, Colorado, New Jersey, North Dakota, Oregon, and Michigan, all on September 27th, some with multiple cities. New York has 4 separate locations happening, Florida 2. And on the day before, Friday, September 26th, Atlanta, Georgia will have it in Atlanta at the CDC. So my friend Tia Severino is going to be holding that one. She is going to hold it across the street, not on the sidewalk, because sometimes the CDC likes to say, hey, you can't stand on that sidewalk. That's our public property sidewalk. So in the spirit of that, we want these rallies to be in. Tia is not going to cause any problems at all. She'll be right across the street. I want to make this very, very clear. Children's Health Defense, myself, MAHA Action, all of us are calling on peaceful, respectable rallies in support of RFK, in support of MAHA. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would not want any other type of display in his name other than one that was peaceful and respectful about dialogue, about presenting facts. And if there's disagreement, there's disagreement. That is fine. But I just want to make sure to say that, and for everybody to know that there's a lot of hype, rightfully so, around these rallies. It's great that because of this call last week, Politico did a great news piece actually about these rallies that are happening. So for you to find a rally around you, you want to go to childrenshd.org/thankyou-RFK. childrenshd.org/thankyou-RFK. All the rallies are listed there. Please post your photos on social media, put the hashtag up, tag Children's Health Defense, and have fantastic, wonderful, peaceful rallies all across the nation. Tony, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much, Michael. Yeah, peaceful rallies, millions of emails, millions and millions of social media posts. You know, the general mainstream media just won't tell the truth, won't tell the real story of what's gone on in this country. And so we have to tell it. That's why we do this weekly call. And, you know, that's our job. So, you know, one of the things that we're working on now is the Stop the Pesticide Protection Racket. And we want to just make 100% sure that what happened with vaccines in 1986, where they got liability protection, and we went from 7 vaccines for 7 viruses to, you know, now where we have, you know, somewhere between 73 and 92 vaccines that each child takes. So we want to make sure that the same thing doesn't happen with pesticides, and that we don't give these companies liability protection. If they believe in their product, if they're willing to back their product, if they're willing to fight for it, they should stand behind it. And without that liability, we can't have any protection for the American people, for our children. And once again, our children cannot have healthy minds if they don't have healthy bodies. So thanks so much for everybody, you know, for all of you for coming on. Please subscribe to MAHA Report on Substack, and we'll see you back here next week, 4 p.m. on Wednesday.
We will not comply with the institution's sick illusion. No, it won't be televised. Welcome to the revolution. We will not comply with the institution's sick illusion. No, it won't be televised. Welcome to the revolution.
The only thing that will save our country is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other.